Hello, I'm Dahl Russell, and today I'll be talking about the life of Felix-Alexandre Guilmant. And in particular, his Symphony No. 1, his Organ Symphony. When I first presented this lecture, I was speaking about this work alongside a work of Wagner and a work of Tchaikovsky, and my overriding theme was, does character matter? Like Wagner, Guilmant is known for works with a large, grand sound. And he really was a huge star of his day. His recitals attracted crowds as large as 10,000, a number one pop star by any standard. Unlike Wagner, his biographies tell us very little about his personal life. So if you want to be remembered solely for your artistic output, happy Alexandre Guilmant. He has a huge body of work, and it stands more or less on its own without being colored by our opinions of his life. In my research, I have not even been able to find out basics, like whether he was married or not. His work is his record. Given some of the highlights of his resume, maybe his work is enough. Wagner did not really get serious about his music until he was almost 30. Tchaikovsky also started late with his serious music studies in his 20s. Unlike Wagner and Tchaikovsky, Guilmant was, if not a prodigy, at least a talented child performer recognized for his ability. At the age of 12 and 13, he was a regular substitute for his father, a professional organist. By 20, he was church choir director and teaching at the conservatory before he had formal training. He did then go on to study in Brussels and in Paris. He was 25 when he was chosen to play the inaugural recital of the organ at Saint-Sulpice in Paris, and this really kick-started his career as a touring virtuoso. He is generally credited as being the first traveling French organ virtuoso, and his concert schedule truly was around the world. We do need to be cognizant that some of his fame was the luck of timing. His type of grand organ works perfectly coincided with the development of the grand Cavaille-coll organ. It was the confluence of artist and instrument that we see time and time again with many instruments, a confluence that results in fame for the artist, a zenith for the instrument, and generations of musicians influenced by the work of that master. For many artists, that would be the best kind of longevity, of greater worth than fleeting popularity. Guilmant came from a family of highly regarded church organists, and his fame was solidified by his prodigious early talent. These two things together mean that, unlike Wagner and unlike Tchaikovsky, he did not have to strive for attention or finances, and possibly, like a preacher's child, having been raised with the eyes of the church congregation upon him, either he was unremarkable, or at least he learned to be discreet. Certainly discretion was something Wagner neither desired nor valued. But with Guilmant, we just don't know. Angel or demon, what we know is of a large talent and steady and prolific work. He did extensive research on early organ works and texts to create massive compilations of historical significance that continue to be seminal references in organ study and literature today. Like an earlier church organist, Johann Sebastian Bach, he was also a prolific composer. The majority of his compositions are vocal works, masses, liturgical works, and a cantata. This was in addition to his more than 40 volumes of organ works, including multiple volume collections of historical works, one of them 10 volumes, another one is 18 volumes. Guilmant, as with many teachers, had a handful of favorite students over time with whom he worked closely for extended periods of time. Again, this is not the stuff of tabloids, but of quiet, serious craftsmanship. In his early 40s, he was appointed as organist at the Trinité Church in Paris, a post he held for 30 years. In his 60s, he joined famed organist composers Charles Borde and Vincent Dandy in forming an organ scola, and a year later he joined the Paris Conservatoire, where he took over from Charles Widor on the faculty teaching organ. Musically, he was very much a child of Widor, who created the large-scale Organ Symphony. These were works for solo organ which treated the organ as, quote, the king of instruments, unquote, capable of being a whole symphony on its own. With the birth and development of the deep, resonant, and versatile, enriched French organ, there were two distinct camps of thought that still exist today. One believed that the organ was a symphony in itself, and it obviated the need of an orchestra. Widor was in that camp. Guilmant was in the other camp. He believed that the organ was not a replacement for the orchestra, but a distinct and distinctive solo instrument. Guilmant also excelled in this organ symphony form and composed 8 of these, but he preferred a more modest title. In keeping with his view of the organ as an individual instrument, his virtuosic works for solo organ were titled organ sonatas. But also in keeping with his idea of the organ as distinctive and virtuosic solo instrument, he did orchestrate one of his sonatas, calling this his Symphony for Organ and Orchestra. This is what we will hear today, his Symphony No. 1. It is known for having plenty of showmanship and blockbusting pizzazz. As with any solo instrument in front of the orchestra, you will want to pay special attention to the variety of tonal quality and effects created by the organ soloist. It is said that Widor and others used the orchestra mainly to make the organ louder, but Guilmant used the orchestra to add additional tonal color to the varied palette of organ voices, so you'll want to listen for that subtlety and finesse. Overall, this work is not considered to be groundbreaking, but instead it takes full advantage of the increased capacity of the Romantic era organ, expanding the possibilities. The overall structure is Italian sonata form, fast, slow, fast. Throughout the work, you'll want to listen for shades of the Gregorian and early music that Guilmant had studied so intensively. The first movement has the intimacy and intricacy of the Baroque. The second movement begins like a leisurely stream, then grows in complexity like water falling over itself. At the premiere, this second movement provoked such response that the second movement was encored. The third movement has the grandeur of triumph, a grand procession with a boisterous fanfare by the organ, and in the brass section, a rousing finale. enjoy the music of Felix-Alexandre Guilmant.